Hi, this is our Module 8 case study over bringing your own device. And we're going to go ahead and just jump right into it. We have the publicity, politics, and priorities. So for section 1, the facts. What do we know about this case study and what are we going to do moving forward? So things that we know for sure. There is a need in our district for an increased capacity for integrating technology into the classroom instruction while keeping costs in line. I am the superintendent of the district that needs to have this increased capacity for technology, and it is my job to figure out how we can increase our capacity while keeping costs in line. I am thinking and considering implementing a policy of bringing your own device to school. We already have several students, especially at our high school level, that are on their devices constantly. In fact, one of our biggest issues is that students are sent to their office with referrals because they can't handle their technology appropriately and they're on their devices constantly. We also know that a BYOD would expand the use of technology significantly within our building and within our district. It could also be seen as a cost-effective way to implement technology across our district. So who all is involved? First of all, we have me, the superintendent of the district, having to make the decision and getting stakeholders involved. Next, we have our building administrators and our building admin. There's 3 of them. They are willing to consider a BYOD device for the policy for the district. However, the second part of the case study is engaging in social media, and they are not really so cool with that. They have a couple of concerns about what that would look like and what exactly they would have to do in order to be the social media coordinator for their buildings. So not as keen on that one as they are on the BYOD policy. Next, I have my PTA. I have not been pushed out my initiative yet or looked at next steps, but they've got wind of the idea, and they're extremely worried about equity when it comes to devices, and they just want some more information. They've reached out to me in a friendly manner and asked that I come maybe explain what my thoughts are with them. At this point, I'm not ready to do that because I don't have a plan of action yet, so I will probably try and push that back until I have a better plan, but when I do, they'll be the first to know. I love the idea of pulling them in as community to help get their opinions. I have the parents. They are very concerned that they will have to purchase more technology, even for their youngest children. Concerned about how it's going to look in our K-2 classrooms, those primary ages where those students typically don't have cell phones yet, but could potentially be required to bring one if we implemented the BYOD policy. So just some concerns there from parents. And then, of course, we have our teachers and our students, and they're not listed on this slide, but our teachers are the ones that will have to implement the policy, and then our students are the ones that are directly affected by the policy. So they are the reason that we're talking about this, and who we will look at eventually to see what needs to happen. So legal and ethical issues. At this point, nobody's been harmed. No laws have been broken. I haven't implemented anything yet. I've just been thinking about it. If using social media becomes a requirement for principals, expectations need to be written into their contracts about what that will look like. You also have to think a lot about security and how that will look if we do our own devices. It'll be extremely hard to monitor those, and so when this becomes an actual plan of action, we'll have to think through how that will look from a security standpoint within our network and on our networks for our students. So what exactly is happening? Our district needs to increase their access to technology in a cost-effective manner. Right now, we are not doing due diligence with technology. We are not meeting the needs of our student or our district. It is our job to increase this in an equitable manner and in a cost-effective manner that benefits the entire district, not just a few. So, the facts. Our people, our places, and our program. First and foremost, we have our people, the most important thing in my opinion. First of all, the superintendent, so me, and then we have our administrators. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. They are willing to implement the policy, but they are not sold on it. They also really aren't very cool with the idea of doing social media, and we'll touch on that just a little bit later also. We have our teachers who, this is one of the biggest concerns I have actually, is the devices that they don't get during breaks. So currently, my teachers all have devices, but they are pulled during winter break, spring break, and summer times to be scrubbed for viruses and have updates installed. This to me is just a little bit crazy. I have never been in a district where teachers don't get to keep their devices 24/7. I, for one, cannot imagine not getting to take my device home. I would be at work forever. I would never get caught up. I work at least a couple hours almost every weekend, and usually on breaks, a couple days out of the breaks, just to get myself caught up as do most of my teachers. So I really can't imagine being in a district that does not offer technology 24/7 to at least their teachers. So in my opinion, that's one of the first things we need to change, is figure out how we can push out updates to do at the school, on the school network, and then find a way to scrub for viruses virtually so that our people can hang on to their devices. I think that's a little bit ridiculous that we pull them during breaks. Next, of course, we have our PTA. They have questions for me that need answered, and we'll get to that. And then we have our students. This will have a direct impact on all of our K-12 students. So the most important people, we're here to serve students. And then, of course, we have all other stakeholders. So all of those taxpayers, whether they have students in my building or not, are people that we need to have involved in the decision-making process. So that is important. Next, we have places. We are a small suburban school. There is one elementary, one middle school, and one high school. Parents are concerned about the cost, so there wasn't a ton that talks about our socioeconomic status, but we do know that parents don't want to buy extra devices if they don't have to for students. Programs, we are a K-12 district. We are not yet one-to-one. We do not have a very active social media presence, and we're a public entity because we serve public students. We are not private. So keeping all of that in mind, we have all of our information and stakeholders in Section 5. So information and stakeholders, it'll be critical to pull in all different stakeholders. And so I'm thinking of even our parents that don't have students within our K-12 setting. You know, we have our grandparents, we have aunts and uncles, we have everyone else that pays taxes but might not know what's going on. We need to make sure that we're hearing their voice when we're looking at what we're going to do for our next steps. This can be done through site councils, through open forum meetings, talked about at board discussions, but a way to make sure that we're being transparent with whichever route we decide to implement. And then I also want to make sure that our teachers and administrators are heard. Something I don't love about this is it's going to be a top-down decision. I mean, in the end of it, I will have the final say in what happens, but whatever does happen is going to directly affect teachers and students. It'll be my decision, but in all reality, the actual implementation will not take place by me. It'll take place by our teachers and our administrators, and they're the ones that are going to have to monitor students, help with devices, and do all of the legwork for it. So I want to make sure that whatever we do as a district, I'm able to support them fully. Several things I feel like need to be learned before we can really make a great decision on what's going to happen. First of all, if we implement a bring your own device, what will it cost our families? What will it look like to get every student their own device for implementation? And then how difficult will it be to monitor the devices? So when we talk about legalities and ethics, this is kind of where I struggle, is that if you have students on their own device, how does that look when they plug into our network? And how do we as a district monitor this? I have some concerns with that. And then again, what legal and ethical issues could be faced by implementing the BYOD policy. And I don't feel like at this point we have a good enough tech team to support this. We're not one-to-one. Our tech department's not very big. I think if we're going to implement a bring your own device policy, we'll have to examine what the costs will look like to add extra staff to help make it a doable process. So next we have our options and consequences. And in this section, I want to go through in detail a couple of the options that we have and a couple of consequences that I'm worried about within these options. So next we have our sections 6 and 7, the options and consequences. So I'm going to detail out 4 different options that I have thought of, including one that is to just do nothing. And then from there, I also want to hit a little bit on social media and what my expectations for administrators within social media. So the first thing we have are different options. So option 1 is to implement BYOD as planned. The students that have devices will bring them, we'll get on the network, we'll hook it up, and we will have a plan that goes and work it out from there. Option 2 is implement BYOD for this first year, but have a long-term plan to go one-to-one within the next 3 years. A little bit of information that I feel like I'm missing is in the case study, it said that the district does not have enough devices to go one-to-one, meaning that we do have some devices. I am very curious to know exactly how many devices we have, because then I have option 3, which is the option to go one-to-one. And whether or not I would do this would depend on what our current technology actually is. Are we talking that we have 50% of the devices we need to go one-to-one, 25% or less? That would make a difference to me. And then option 4, of course, is the do nothing option, which we'll talk about a little bit later here. So option one, implementing the BYOD. The pros would be it's done immediately. All of our students that have devices, we can get hooked up. This could be done honestly before the end of the current school year as a test run, and then we could implement it all the way the following year. Some students already have devices, and then probably the biggest pro is that this is extremely cost effective for the district. I mean, we might have to hire one tech assistant, admin assistant, just to help us with connecting devices and monitoring devices, but as far as cost is concerned, our cost is to our family, not our district. So that would not be the worst thing. Cons, difficult to monitor. It's really not very equitable at all. And we would need to spend a significant amount of time developing a policy. What happens when students are on their personal devices, but they break that AUP that is given to them at the start of the year. They're on personal devices, so we really can't take them. But developing that policy and some of those things that we'll have to develop as we come. So it's going to be ongoing policy development, which will be a headache for administrators, which is something that I'd really like to avoid. Option two is to implement a bring your own device policy and then have a long-term plan of going to one-to-one. This again is where I'd like to really know where we're currently at with our devices and how close we are to being one-to-one. So pros, again, this can be done immediately. We can do it as soon as tomorrow with kids that already have their own devices. Some students already have devices, again, and then more cost effective. And then cons are the exact same as going BYOD immediately. It's difficult to monitor, it's not equitable, and we'll have to spend time developing policy. So the pros and cons in those two options are really very similar. Option two is going to require a little bit more strategic planning. And option one is going to take the determination of, is this what we want to do for our long term? Option three is go one-to-one. This is honestly my favorite option as an educator, but I don't know that it's the most doable as a superintendent. So pros, obviously, our students are one-to-one. It's equitable. It's easiest for teachers and students. Cons, it's not budget friendly. I mean, depending on how many devices we would have to purchase, it could be a huge expense to our district and one that's really not even feasible. We'd have to increase tech support to help monitor the devices, and definitely, like I said, probably not possible to do in 1 year. And then option four is do nothing. Pros, it's cost effective and it's easy. So if you wanted to go the easy route, you don't do anything, you leave technology as is, and you just don't do anything. Cons, you were asked to do it, your board told you to do it, the district is behind as far as technology is concerned, so we have to do something, and it's really not beneficial to students to just sit on doing nothing. So whereas it's listed as option four, doing nothing is really not something that I want to that's not an option. Next we have social media, and I mentioned earlier that as a superintendent, I want my principals to be doing more on social media. I'd really like them to jump onto this and make it more of telling them what we're doing good in the school. I want to keep it positive. I don't really expect them to interact on it, more so just post. I think about like LinkedIn profiles, Facebook profiles, Twitter profiles, where we can just post what is going well in the school. So pros, they keep stakeholders up to date with school happenings. Those people that aren't in our building, those taxpayers that don't have kids around, but that still want to know what we're doing, if they can see that on Facebook, I think that's really good. It can be very positive, and it can be ran by district office. So if my principals aren't really on board, we can find someone within our tech department to have at least a district-wide social media page to highlight the good things within our district. And this is kind of one of my favorite ideas, is that social media could be run by the teachers. So for example, I know a building that every week they have a teacher takeover, and they highlight the different things going on that week in their classroom, and it makes social media pretty easy. You have 5 weeks, because it's a K5 or a K4 building, you have 5 weeks worth of postings done for you, and then the office assistants do the other 3 or 4 weeks, and then it just rotates every 9 weeks so that parents get a really good in-depth view of what's happening, and it's very positive. We've gotten great feedback over it. Cons, it can be hard to unplug from. It's if you run a social media account, it's you have to follow it. You have to make sure things are being appropriate. You have to be a mediator on it. It can be difficult. There are no clear contractual obligations for administrators. So this is something that I would want to have written into my administrators' contracts if it's the route we go. And then it can be negative. There are always your keyboard warriors that are going to post on anything that you post, and they're going to post negative, and that can be hard to negate sometimes. So section 8, what is our best option? I've struggled just a little bit with this because the option that I really want to implement is going one-to-one. I think that it would be best for our teachers and students. I think it would be easiest for our district to monitor. I think that the times that we are in right now require people to have devices. One-to-one to me is kind of a no-brainer. The issue is there's a bigger picture of the budget. And I don't think there's any way that we can district-wide implement one-to-one in a budget-friendly way within 1 year. That's just not, it's not feasible. Devices are too expensive. The tech support needed is too expensive. We would burn through all of our money, whether it was in capital outlay processes or however else we decide to pay for it. It's not feasible. So I do think that the best option is option 2, which would be to implement a bring your own device with a plan to go one-to-one within the next 3 years. So why do I think this? It's the best of both worlds. First of all, it's cost effective. You can start out by getting kids that have their own devices hooked on, and right there immediately you have, your one-to-one, you have that one-to-one with their own device. And then you can find your kiddos, especially at your K2 levels, that don't have own devices, and get them a school issued device. And I think we already have some, so that would be a great place to start. And then it can be on their phases. We can get our K2 kiddos that don't have devices hooked onto devices, and we can get our juniors and seniors that need the devices, or even our 9-12 that need devices, their own devices. That way you could be one-to-one 9-12 with everyone that needs them between bring your own device and one-to-one that the district already has, and you could have K2 with their own devices. And then just fill in your gaps from 3-9 as you go. You would definitely have to have a way to phase this. And then it would ease stakeholders' apprehensions. You can make a plan to get devices to your highest need students first. And we would have to do a stakeholder input survey. There's holes in this theory. I know there are. And there's inequities in this theory. You have to look at, which kid gets the school devices and why, which kids have to bring their home devices and why. And there are definitely holes within this plan. But as far as a cost-effective plan that also gets students access to technology quickly, this is the best one. So implementation of the decision. This is where things get just a little bit more tricky. We have to choose the path, and if we choose the path to go one-to-one with bring your own devices and then fill in the gap with one-to-one for our other students, the first critical component is communication. How is this going to get communicated to all stakeholders, all teachers, all students, and all parents, plus the PTA, because they're invested? How can I go to them and tell them, here's what we're going to do, and here's which students get devices, and here's which students are going to be in the phased-in plan? Next, the most important is strategic planning. There is going to have to be a committee that is developed that goes through and strategically plans who gets devices and when they get devices, and how those devices are monitored, and what policies do we need to have in place from day one to help monitor our students that are on their own devices at home versus students that are on the school network with the school network devices. There has to be equity between at least how we have our policies in place for what happens while they're on the school grounds. And then, of course, the implementation of it. How are we going to get devices into all of our students' hands within 3 years? And how are we going to monitor those devices? And then making it equitable. And this is the area that I'm struggling the most in, is by going one-to-one immediately, it would be equitable immediately. It just isn't cost effective. If we do a bring your own device, some students are going to be on iPads or cell phones while other students are on Chromebooks or laptops. There's no equity within the actual devices. The equitability comes within the network. Everybody has the same access to the technology while they're at school, and the same network and the same internet speed. Their devices are just different. I also think it's important that until we are fully implemented one-to-one, teachers are not allowed to give homework that requires internet access outside of school. That just, to me, is not even a little bit fair. And even when we do get one-to-one, then we'll have to start talking about, the broadband access and who has internet access and how do we get access to all of our students at home, not only on devices, but also through the internet. So in choosing my path of going one-to-one with students that have their own device, and then coming up with a way to get one-to-one devices for each student within the next 3 years, communication is key, followed by strategic planning, and then getting it implemented and making it equitable to everyone in the long run. Hopefully, in the end, it is a great plan.